Hello and good day, Dr. Yates. I do want to take the opportunity to go through the defense questions that you've laid out for us. So I'll go in the sequence of the questions that you've provided. So as you know, my topic is the public relations of W.E.B. Du Bois, a case study of the crisis, and my purpose for this study is to examine whether and how the communication of W.E.B. Du Bois as editor of the crisis may be viewed as public relations. It's typically seen as journalism, sometimes viewed as propaganda, but I like to examine Du Bois's work in light of Russell and Lamb's conceptualization of public relations. So, why this topic for me? I think the genesis for me has a lot to do with my own practice in public relations and also my own teaching as well, and my exposure to the often. I think the message you get from a lot of public relations textbooks is that public relations is an invention of American capitalism, because the history largely emphasizes figures like P.T. Barnum, Ivy Lee, Edward Bernays, who are often seen as the fathers of public relations. And so all of that is often crystallized in excellence theory based on the work of Grunig and others. The idea that public relations, at least in the way it's presented in most textbooks, is really coming out of basically there's four phases of public relations that begins with P.T. Barnum's publicity stance, and then it evolves and then progressively becomes more ethical in the 1960s. So the result again of all of that is this overall emphasis on public relations as largely equivalent to corporate communication. So thinking beyond that limitation, I began to wonder who else might be possibly practicing public relations in that, especially in that early 20th century period when it was supposedly born or birthed in American corporate in the American corporate world. And then the name that kept coming to me was W.E.B. Du Bois, because he lived at the same time. He was a contemporary of Ivy Lee as well as Edward Bernays, and he did a lot of what we might today call strategic communication, right? Especially when he was the editor of the Crisis newspaper for the NAACP. So that's kind of where the genesis of the idea came for me. Now, why do I believe this is an important topic today? Well, I would argue that the dominant origin story of a discipline also serves as sort of like DNA for how it's going to evolve and develop. So if we hold on to the idea that public relations was birthed in this corporate business environment, then it evolves and develops as basically a corporate business practice. And so that marginalizes other strands and practices in public relations, including cause-related public relations, nonprofit public relations, and so that provides a limitation that I think probably needs to be addressed. And so the scholarship is beginning to shift to, are there other ways to think about public relations, including the history of public relations, that allows us to reframe it and expand its horizons beyond the world of business. So that's why I think it's important. Again, also, I do hope that this study would also bring forward some practical applications in terms of how W.E.B. Du Bois worked in a very challenging context to develop persuasive messages that were quite effective. And so I think there's probably some lessons that can be learned from this historical work that we can bring forward to um, uh, provide some insights for nonprofit organizations that have working in not exactly the same context, but also working in very challenging circumstances as Du Bois faced. In terms of methodology, as I wrote about in my paper, I chose a case study, and a case study, and I'm going to quote from Stake, 1995, one of my sources, and a leading scholar on case studies. Stake defines the case study as the study of the particularity and complexity of a single case, coming to understand its activity within important circumstances. And I think that makes a case study, I would argue, highly relevant for my study, considering the fact that I'm looking at a selected individual in a very specific time-bound moment in history, and also because Du Bois produced a corpus of work that can be examined within a largely temporal bounded conceptual scope, the work he did writing for the crisis. So we have a body of work that can be looked at within these bounds of a case study. For my methodology, I selected editorials by W.B. Du Bois. He wrote, we're not fully clear how much of the content of the crisis that he wrote, but he clearly wrote, I'd probably, most scholars would say he wrote all the editorials. So the editorials provide a way to isolate content that we know Du Bois wrote. So my focus is on selected editorials. He was the editor for 23 years. That's a long time, lots of editorials. So I'll be using purposeful sampling, looking at editorials over a 5-year time frame. Just to make this manageable for a dissertation. That would amount to 60 editorials, which I would think would provide a reasonable body of data for analysis. I also proposed using a directed qualitative content analysis and framework analysis, which would allow me to engage with theory, Lyman Russell's theory. So there's 5 constructs, 5 dimensions to that, and I have 5 dimensions that have to do with strategic thinking, public relations. So intersecting those 5 by 5 dimensions, there you have 25 intersections that allow me to code data for that. So I would think that would allow for theoretical sensitivity and a good framework analysis base for coding. Your other question was philosophy. So I have tried to maintain an interpretivist, constructivist frame for my whole study, largely because of my ontological positioning on knowledge in general, but definitely of history as well. My view of history is that although we can point to historical facts and events as real, history, some constructivist historians will tell us, is also interpretive. History is we don't have a full understanding of historical facts and events, and so we take a slice of history and we do interpretation. So my sense is that what Du Bois himself did in his editorial writing, he was a historian too, is that he was interpreting the events that were before him. So my own interpretation of Du Bois's editorials is interpretive, and so in that sense it is constructivist, in that I'm trying to construct an understanding of Du Bois' work, Du Bois' interpretation of the historical moment. And then finally, your final question was, will you continue with this dissertation topic? I would. I think that all things considered, this is a feasible dissertation topic for me for at least three good reasons. One, the personal connections with my own background in public relations, including, and also I did mention this in my paper, Du Bois actually ended up moving to Ghana, where I'm from originally. So I have some contextual knowledge of him. I know all of that has to be dealt with some reflexivity. But there's some interest in that because it has some relevance to my own growing up in Ghana. So that's one. That's a personal piece. It has implications for public relations, which is my area of discipline and my area of teaching as well. And also the theoretical piece is, I think, pretty important as well. The extension of public relations historiography, bringing in Du Bois would be significant, and also the applications as well. So that would be, in a nutshell, my response to the defense questions. And thank you again for this class. Thanks.